The Department of the Interior and Local Government, Central Luzon, presents this series of instructional videos as part of the formulation and updating of LGU Comprehensive Development Plans.
Magandang araw mga kaplano. Para sa ating episode ngayon, ating tatalakayin ang Stream 2 ng LDIP proper, Determining Investible Funds. Ating munang pag-usapan ang rules for determining investible funds, then determining investible funds, at ang 5-step process for Stream 2. Sa pag-discuss natin ang 5-step process, pag-usapan din natin ang 4 financial growth scenarios. We will end with a short summary and a quick 5-item quiz. Ano nga ba ang rules for determining investible funds? The Local Finance Committee is charged with the setting of the level of the annual expenditures and the ceilings of spending for economic, social, and general services based on the approved local development plans. Ang Local Finance Committee ay binubuo ng LPDC, Budget Officer, at Treasurer. The LPDC, in close coordination with the C or MPDC, should formulate the required financial plan for consideration and approval of the sanggunian. Ngayon, paano naman natin dinedetermine ang investable funds? This must be done una sa lahat in a transparent manner. All assumptions at mga considerations must be clearly defined and stated. The number of public projects that an LGU can finance depends on the following. Una, revenue. Ito ay ang mga inflow of funds to the LGU regardless of whether the source is repayable or not. Expenditures, debt or utang, debt ceiling, at sources of additional revenue. Meron tayong 5 steps sa Stream 2. Step 1 is to collect data on revenues and to establish trends. Step 2 is to collect data on operating expenditures and debt, and also to establish trends. Step 3 is to establish structural relationships between revenues, expenditures, and other socioeconomic trends. Step 4 is project revenues and operating expenditures. Step 5 is to compute the financial surplus. Pag-usapan muna natin ang Step 1. Collect data on revenues. We have to collect appropriate revenue data and determine historical trends. Collect data on recurring o paulit-ulit and non-recurring or hindi paulit-ulit na revenue for the past 3 to 5 years. Analyze the historical trends in terms of the average annual growth rate. In more specific terms, historical analysis need to be done on the following revenue items using the forms na ipapakita natin in the following slides. Una, real property tax, at ginagamit natin ang Form 5 para dito. Next, business fees and licenses using Form 6, other taxes also using Form 6, service and operations income also using Form 6, and internal revenue allotment or IRA also using Form 6. Here's a snapshot of Form 5 o yung time series record of property tax revenue. Ang mga non-recurring or hindi pa ulit-ulit na revenue sources ay ang mga sumusunod. Grants and aid from local and foreign sources, special appropriations or transfers from Congress or other units of government, inter-fund transfers, at interlocal government transfers. Lahat ng ito ay pumapasok sa Form 6. Narito ang snapshot ng Form 6 o ang time series record of revenue other than property tax. Step 2 ay to collect data on operating expenditures o mga gastos and debt o mga utang. Collect appropriate operating expenditure data, including existing debt service, and determine historical trends. Operating expenditures include the following: personal services or PS, including social charges, maintenance and other operating expenses or MOOE, such as office supplies, utilities such as power, water, telecom, office equipment, and miscellaneous expenses. Historical analysis need to be done on the following expenditure items using Form 7: general public services, social services, economic services, and all others. In the case of mga gastos during election years may result in abnormally high expenditure levels, such abnormal years need to be taken out of the projection exercise. Here's a snapshot of Form 7, or the time series record of LGU operating expenditure. Part of step 2 is determining the amount of debt. The amount of debt service payments for existing and other anticipated LGU obligations must be established and compared to the relevant, if any, statutory debt service ceilings. Here's a snapshot of Form 8, or the obligated debt service expenditure. Step 3 is to establish structural relationships. Establish structural relationships of revenue and expenditure items to population and economic development. Among the key factors that must be considered in assessing structural relationships between revenue and expenditure items are the following: overall national and regional economic picture, including development trends, demographic shifts, changes in the local market, particularly in the local labor market. In conducting trend analysis, narito ang ilang mga notes na maaari nating maging gabay. Una, distinguish between recurring revenue sources and non-recurring ones. The LDIP needs a stable source of financial resources that depend on revenue sources which are assured of being collected every year, at ito ang mga recurring revenue sources. Number two, distinguish between the impact on revenue volume of the following: changes in the tax base, such as increases in the number of taxable structures or businesses, and changes in tax rates. Number three, take into consideration an unusually large increase in particular revenue source for a particular year, which may be attributed to change in rates, new system of billing and collection, or other procedural and systems improvements such as granting of tax amnesty, enactment of new tax laws and ordinances. Ang increases na attributed to the above cannot be expected to continue in the future, non-recurring ang mga to. Therefore, their impact must be segregated or alisin natin sa analysis. Let's move on to step 4, project revenue and expenditures. Project future recurring revenue and operating expenditure levels. Future recurring levels can be projected based on a careful assessment of all probable factors that affect each revenue source. RPT collection, or real property tax collection, should be projected separately because of its large contribution to LGU revenue sources, and because real properties will be the main beneficiary of LGU investments in terms of increased values. At gagamitin natin dito ang Form 9. Narito ang snapshot of Form 9, or projection of property tax revenue. Sa step 4 ay pag-aaralan din natin ang business fees and licenses, other taxes, services and operations, and all others which can be projected using either the historical growth rates or using computed elasticities and assumed per capita income growth rates. At gagamitin natin dito ang makita natin ngayon na Form 10, or the projection of total revenue. The ERA projections should already consider the increases provided for in RA 7160. Ang mga future na normal na recurring expenses can be projected using either of the following techniques: the historical 3 to 5 year annual average expenditure increase, or the historical average expenditure per unit of output in the case of LGU business enterprises. At gagamitin natin dito ang Form 11. In using either of the two techniques, factor into the projections the effects of political and organizational developments within the LGU on the future growth of various departments. Four alternative growth scenarios can be used by the LGU in coming up with the required financial projects. Here's a snapshot of Form 11 o ang projection of LGU operating expenditure. Pag-usapan naman natin ang apat na financial growth scenarios. Ang una ay ang no change. This assumes that the present level of financial variable will continue to the foreseeable future. It uses a constant absolute amount based on a recent year or on the average over a certain number of years. It may be used if the historical trend analysis indicates little or no change, and if there is no reason to expect any change in this pattern. This may also be used to provide a conservative estimate on an uncertain revenue source, such as grants and aids. Ang second na growth scenario is change by constant amounts. This assumes yearly changes based on constant amounts. The third is change at a constant rate. This assumes that yearly changes at constant amounts based on the historical annual average percentage change estimate. Percentage change estimate is multiplied by the current year value to derive the amount that should be added to the current year value to arrive at the next year's value. And finally, correlation with demographic or economic variable. This scenario assumes a constant relationship between the financial variable and a demographic or economic variable. Let's move on to step 5, ang pinakahuling step, compute the financial surplus. Compute the financial surplus available for the financing of new investments. The following computational procedure can be used to establish the new investment financing capacity of the LGU. Project revenues first, then deduct projected operating expenditures, deduct existing debt service requirements, and the balance is the amount available for new investment financing. After determining the future revenue inflows and the corresponding revenue outflows, the new investment financing capacity of an LGU can be established. And we can use Form 12 for this, the projection of new investment financing potential. To summarize, pinag-usapan natin ang Stream 2 or determining investable funds. At ang Stream 2 ay may 5 steps. Collect data on revenues, collect data on operating expenditures and debt, establish structural relationships, project revenues and operating expenditures, and compute the financial surplus. Handa na ba kayo para sa ating 5-item quiz? Question number 1. The following determines the number of public projects that an LGU can finance except expenditures, debt, equity, revenue. Ang tamang sagot ay equity. Question number 2. Stream 2 has how many steps? 14, 12, 9, 6, 5. Ang tamang sagot ay 5. Question number 3. How many forms are used in Stream 2? 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Ang tamang sagot ay 8. A financial growth scenario which may be used to provide a conservative estimate on an uncertain revenue source such as grants and aids. No change, change by constant amounts, change at a constant rate, correlation with demographic or economic variable. Ang tamang sagot ay A, no change. And finally, question number 5, historical data, trend analysis, and projections require how many years? 10 years is standard, 5 to 10 years, 3 to 5 years, depending on the capacity and resources of the LGU to compile historical data. Ang tamang sagot ay 3 to 5 years. Maraming salamat sa iyong pakikinig, Kaplano, at nawa ay marami kang natutunan sa episode na ito.